Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our latest in our Encompass webinar series. My name is Christopher Shipley. I'm the Executive Director of Public Policy, and we are pleased to bring you another one of our exciting Encompass webinars. Today's webinar is entitled TDM Unpredictability and the Transition to IP, why having the right partner for network transformation is key. And we're thrilled to have one of our marketplace members, Transaction Network Services, TNS, join us today. You know, IP interconnection and the TDM transition is an important topic to our members. It's one that our robocall working group has been very interested in when it comes to how do we further the implementation of things like stir shaken, NG911, and rich call data, which will encourage greater and more accurate call labeling. And at the same time, we recognize that this is a bigger issue that has greater implications, intercarrier compensation, transport costs. These are all things that are implicated by the TDM transition, and we're thrilled to have two experts here today to walk us through some of the unpredictability that's going on in the market and the need to make that transition. So it gives me a great pleasure at this point to introduce Joe Dechant and Barry Metz of Transaction Network Services. They're going to lead us through today's presentation, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us.
That's great. Thank you guys very much for this opportunity today. We wanted to really walk the participants through the layout of our interactions today with how we will talk to really the unpredictability of TDM and what it's turned into over the last few years, especially the last 3 years. It's been a very sharp change in direction. And then what some of the key components as we look for partnering with our customers in the market and what they should be looking for in a transformation partner, and how we have the right approach, solution sets that really blends to what the operator is looking to do. Every operator does have very different networks, and it requires flexibility. So we'll get into those items and really walk through some of the solutions we see today to help operator community look at where to get started with their journey, and each one of those will certainly have opportunity for them to evolve and take very positive steps forward, and then map out a phase plan that can work for them as we move forward. Then we'll wrap up with some Q&A.
That's great, Joe. Well, let me set the stage a little bit, I think, with our first question, right? Which is, within the last 2 years, TDM-based networks, have become very unpredictable, and providers are sort of increasingly recognizing the benefits of transitioning to IP. Can you start us off by telling us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think what's really been at the crux of all of that is that as operators have been migrating to stir shaken with regards to getting call authentication into the path, the actual amount of capacity has materially shifted off. Therefore, from a general economic perspective, with the less volume in the network, the overall costs of supporting network have been going up. And with that, we've seen some really important changes as far as carrier support, on how they are supporting TDM, the resources for it, as well as ultimately the amount of traffic that now is shared or exchanged at the national level has significantly changed the underlying TDM infrastructure. So each layer of the ecosystem, we're seeing vendors, customers, and key providers that are shifting their focus away from it, which is driving the costs up, and it's ultimately putting a lot of pressure on the operator community. I see a lot of competitive constraints, probably some very unforeseen implications from implementing stir shaken is the competitive nature of what's happened, on where companies are required to do certain interconnects via TDM. So I do believe that there's an opportunity to make a shift here. Probably one of the other things we should map out here is that as these networks have shifted to stir shaken and open up the path towards IP, not only additional revenue opportunities are unlocked by the ease in implementing new solutions into the IP domain, but it's as much about voice security, providing new advanced applications to detect risks in phone calls and continue to support operators in delivering a trustworthy experience to the consumer. So those are all great reasons of why we see this transformation as an opportunity for the operators to get to a new environment here. Now, I did touch a little bit about some of these key items. As you look within the ecosystem today, a lot of the operator community is looking at how will their life cycle be impacted. What will be the key suppliers? There's been some pretty recent news around some very large suppliers in the space and how they're shifting focus and shifting, products and not even, turning certain solutions down as they shift priority to, fiber or to, cloud-based solutions. That leaves a large market segment that has a need for a migration and a network transformation approach. As we look to what's happening in the ecosystem, there's a large number of folks that have really seen an entire life cycle of the technology that ultimately is transitioning either to new roles, chasing new technology deployments, and we're seeing the resource shift with expertise to run which was a very complex and multi-layered architecture. So when you put together, supply chain challenges, key vendors, shifting focus, the price ups, and then ultimately the operational support day to day, it really brings a lot of pressure to the operator community, to maintain these legacy networks. And with operators deploying stir shaken, for the operators that have not or have gaps in their portfolio, there's still quite a few networks out there that don't have coverage. A very large amount of TDM still exists. The evolution of stir shaken, the evolution of analytics is set in the middle, is getting even more complex, and the opportunity to make changes is ultimately going to help to improve those consumer experiences as we move forward here, which is not possible in the current TDM network.
So, Joe, this is really helpful. I appreciate you sort of setting the scene there. I couldn't agree more, particularly with stir shaken is getting more complicated, or at least we need to sort of identify and standardize more solutions in order to make sure that it's working the way that it's intended to. But, what should telcos be considering, in terms of making the evolution to IP a success, and what kind of solutions and solution sets are needed to accomplish this?
Yes. So, the main things that we're looking at is, really understanding the operator's current situation, using our insights to our current customer architectures, as well as the products that they have with us. We spend time with our customers to really map out a plan for them that makes sense. There's a lot of places that we can get started at with the project. And what we really started to zero in on is where can they take the first steps that can have the most opportunity for them in seeing results, right? So an opportunity to really transform and show very near term answers to help fund and provide financing for various phases of the projects that we can come up with. And then also just being flexible, understanding where the operator is at with their current transition plan, where we can complement, where we can scale, also where we can bring in additional expertise to bring in extra acceleration in certain areas of where there's highest cost. right? A lot of things that go into this picture is, what ultimately is out there from an operator perspective on financing a solution, in finding the right capital structure, ensuring that they've got understanding of the regulatory position. That's a really big item as far as how to navigate through with network changes that still allows them to maintain the right funding, keeping traffic in the markets, but also transforming on how they can get traffic out, leveraging interconnect agreements. And then where optimized views are at, shifting those interconnect agreements to a new hierarchy. This is, I think, overall important in providing, a transition plan, because there is a lot of work that goes into this. A lot of folks, you can go and find, particular types of components to make pieces of the network, to evolve, but to really put together a holistic plan, you do run into situations where interoperability is key. Getting the right configurations, getting through, the right integrations. We've seen, more than 60% of our customers transition in the last year to a new IP-based interconnect solution on the signaling side, and we're also working with them on the voice side to make those similar changes. But in previous years to that, only a few had made the change because there is complexity in bringing new solutions to market. And where we've seen operators go it alone, there's still several of them that are still working to figure out those initial configurations, to get started. So there is value in having a great team behind the initiative that can help the operators accelerate their plans.
You just said you've seen 60% of your clients starting to make the transition. Can you talk just a little bit about what kind of business models your clients have?
Yeah, I mean, it's operators of all types, mobile, fixed, wireline, cable type companies. But they all have varying layers of complexity, of where they've got their own internal IP networks, or they are predominantly leased line networks. But a lot of them have fiber partnerships in which they can get northbound out of their networks very efficiently. So that's a pretty important component. And then where they have existing technologies, we have a pretty cookie cutter approach and how to help them convert off of that. And where they need additional help, for example, for regulatory keeping traffic in their market, we've got our link replacement gateways that can go in those markets and help provide a technology bridge really between the TDM environment where that switch might only be TDM capable, and then being able to convert them to an all IP interconnect or an IP signaling solution. And that's really where we've seen a lot of the synergy is making it simple, making it as straightforward as possible, so that the outcome can be realized quickly.
Right.
Okay. So as we head into our overall solutions sets that come into the picture, there's quite a host of considerations that have to be put into the picture. Probably one of the most important ones as we think through the customer's transformation journey is ultimately where are they at, and where are they currently investing, and where can we complement that. What we found is that as operators look, they've got an access side where they've got their residential customers, and they've got our enterprise customers, small, medium business customers on the access side. And then on the backside of their business, they've got interconnect partners, off-net connectivity. And most of our areas of focus to get the project off to a fast start, we start with the interconnect side of where the cost and the TDM price increases are happening the most is in the off-net interconnects, of where that operator, they don't control the TDM transport, and they don't control really the charging model for those interconnect costs that they lease from other providers. So in that space, by being able to focus them on an off-net conversion, it can help them, to position each one of these layers. And so whether it's a signaling or trunking migration, it has, peering partners engaged, it has rehoming activities. The overall end state of an architecture for the operator is key. And then where we need to support that operator's transition, we've got professional services with some of the industry's best people to help us make those transitions for them. And we ultimately overall help to simplify, the outcome, right? So when we simplify billing, the overall solution gets a lot easier to manage and to move forward with. Barry, you want to walk through?
Yeah, well, and listen, Joe, this is all great. And Barry, before I turn it over to you, I just wanted to encourage those that are participating at home. If you have questions at home, if you have questions that you would like to ask of our panelists today, please, by all means, put them into the Q&A, which you can find obviously right down there at the bottom of your screen. It's our plan, I think, to handle that Q&A at the end of the presentation, but we'd love to populate the Q&A with some questions and have those ready for Joe and Barry at the end. Barry, I think as we start to move on and look at predictability, I mean, I think it's clear, that having a more predictable solution, would allow for greater flexibility. But I mean, could you just tell us, more about, some of the other advantages and key benefits?
Sure, yeah, thank you, Chris. So I think Joe's kind of, done a pretty good job of kind of, summarizing a problem statement and, reasons why telecom service providers, need to begin to, migrate to all IP networks. I think we've kind of gone over a few of these components here. As we know, the cost of TDM circuits is continuing to rise to the point of just, becoming cost prohibitive for the service providers. Maintaining a single IP network basically just, streamlines, the architecture, becomes more state of the art, easier to maintain, removing old equipment from the network. Obviously can reduce cost. As some of you may know, a lot of those old switches, they require a lot of power. They require a lot of air conditioning, and they're just very expensive to maintain. There's very little opportunity to scale the network, with TDM circuits no longer, being an option. And then, of course, being compliant with stir shaking and other FCC mandates is certainly one of the driving reasons for migrating to IP-based network.
Okay, thank you, Barry. So I think what we really want to walk through here in the next stage is the as an operator, are you ready to make this shift, right? Are you ready to look at how can you get to an all IP voice network that complements the other shift towards IP networks? A lot of the companies that we work with, they are running many networks, and it puts a lot of strain in their business. So by simplifying the voice architecture and driving literally TDM out of their network, the goal is to ultimately get them to a more cost-effective, scalable infrastructure, to make these changes. Okay. So as we really dig in here, some of the biggest items to really think through is when an operator is making this journey, mapping out a nice phased migration strategy for where the customer is at is important. Really addressing, from the priority standpoint on where to get started, sometimes is the hardest part. And what we have found is a recipe that brings a layer of execution, that the companies that we partner with and the companies that we deliver the solution to, ultimately brings savings early in projects, and it helps them accelerate the solutions through their business, through the network, and through to the actual benefit statement of cost realization, as they migrate from TDM to IP. It does require some really critical changes within how traffic is routed, and how traffic gets to and from the PSTN is one of the most critical components. But also it shifts the ultimate scale of where the ultimate traffic will live. And so as we have made investments over the past decade in our infrastructure, and our interfaces to our customers, we are now seeing a lot of the benefit to how that can bring simplification to their voice architecture. The easier we can make it for the operator, it turns into an opportunity to provide best-in-class type solutions for how we keep consumers protected, as well as bring enriched engagements from enterprises to those consumers. That's going to become all the more important as we see very complex and concerning robocall scams that are coming. It's very critical that the carrier leverages the new technologies around call authentication to really help protect both sides of their customer bases, enterprises and consumers, with new solutions. Okay.
And, Joe, I know that you all have prepared some diagrams, I think, to help us understand the steps involved in some of that migration, and a recommended approach. I was wondering if you could just sort of walk us through some of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of the migration strategy, it's really to look and see where does the operator have the best opportunity to start. And in this particular case, what we find is being able to move their off-net traffic is one of the biggest and most important steps, because what it does is it frees up those local trunk groups to be optimized. In an all IP interconnect model, what's really important is being able to see a quick conversion. So being able to, number one, have a very comprehensive reach through the carrier infrastructure to bring diversity, robust routing across the nation, and being able to provide ultimate reach is important to being able to bring scale into the operator transition plan. So we usually start with the operator, if they don't already have an IP interconnect with us, getting that stood up, and then coordinating with them on a market by market basis. In some cases, simplifying it into aggregation pods as far as how we can organize customer networks, so that we can have a transformation initiative through various phases, with different aggregation points in their network. A lot of times what we can see is customers have taken steps in certain markets, and they might be in the middle of some very complex switch conversions or replacing switches, and those business cases are usually pretty tough because it takes time and it impacts both sides of the equation. In our model, what we work on is really providing an overlay gateway that converts the customer from TDM to all IP for voice, and then work within the community to make sure that we can offload 85% of traffic very early in the project, so we can then start the disconnect of the TDM and really work to narrow down any remaining TDM in their network, right? So we have a methodology in which we go through to make these changes happen through access homing tandem and re-leveraging on-net footprint in order to shift traffic through an all IP architecture. The benefits here again go back to the fact that the operators now can more quickly bring services into this architecture faster, but getting at that ability to migrate to traffic is key. So just a quick summary here on the migration approach. Literally within the next quarter, you still have time to improve the budget before the end of the year to work with us to get down the path here, as we see some pretty robust approaches on offloading that legacy TDM and driving those costs out of the business. Part of this timing that's important is that there's a multi-layered type disconnect model that has to happen that can bring a tail to the cost structure for the operator. So understanding the nuance in how we disconnect and ultimately how we help the operator move forward to see results. Everybody has fiscal responsibility to improve the cost structure for their businesses. So being able to deliver that very quickly is what helps build momentum to whether it's one switch to 15 or to 50 switches that somebody's got on up to tier 1 type networks. We have the opportunity to make these changes happen. Okay. Now, when we get into ultimately how does the solution get moving, the most important part early on is having alignment and agreement with our customers on the types of architectures and the type of end state that they need to get to, but qualifying up front really what it's going to take. Where in their network are they having the most pain point, and ultimately gathering data about inventories of circuits and layers of circuits, the types of connectivity that they have, what the life cycles of their switches are, and then walking them through an overall onboarding process where they can validate, test, and onboard the solution. As we get into the execution phases, it really allows you to hand the work off to the teams that know how to do the rehomes and to execute the network transformations. While then you can move on to additional phases of projects from a planning cycle with the leadership teams, as well as with the key designers in the additional phases. So working it through in phased approach so you're progressing at each layer is key. That wraps up our session.
There we go. Well, that is really great information, and we do have a couple of questions here that I can get to, and the first comes from Eric, and this is Barry and Joe. I'll ask you to sort of put your prognosticator hat on, and this is always a fun one. Do you all have an estimate or at least some thinking on when TDM will be fully retired here in the United States? The question, continues, are we talking about 3, 5, or 10 years away? It's always interesting to listen to some of the major carriers talk about what their expectations are. But I mean, the expectations obviously, can differ from reality. And so, just level set this for us a bit. What is the expectation? And I'm assuming, this doesn't necessarily uh, mean I can put this off for this many years. I think it's just a matter of how long are we going to have to sort of deal with this issue. So, Joe, Barry, any thoughts on when TDM will finally have TDM out and IP interconnection in?
Yeah, so I definitely I think that's always a question we've wondered about, right? What we see is there's a tier one network that's stating that by 2026 that they will end of life TDM. When you think back over the last 5-7 years, we can see various mobile operators make very similar choices as far as shutting down TDM, transitioning off. Through mergers and acquisitions, we've seen other tier one networks starting to shut the TDM down. And then through the life cycle of some 3G mobility networks, what we've really seen is a shift in the ecosystem around vendors and suppliers. And how many suppliers will there be left, to ultimately provide, the equipment and the solutions is a big compelling reason to make a shift, right? So about 18 months ago, TNS announced that by the end of 2024, that we'd be shutting down our TDM solution, and we are on track to achieve that goal. And so as companies are looking at how to remove TDM, what I think that they're going to look long term at is to say that there's certainly going to be companies that have their own TDM networks that run fine, that they control the cost structure in, they got their own the transport end to end. There's not a lot of those companies that are out there, and then when they do interface off net, they usually have to have another provider or partner that is an area where the cost structure is exponentially going to continue to grow, and it's going to be tough to provide that coverage. So the predictability of it, I think it's going to be around. There's still going to be a long tail. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see a majority of the TDM get shifted out, and I look for some regulatory type approach to help enable that as well, so that it can ease that transition for the operators.
Okay, so Eric, just so I know that your answer, make sure we have an answer to your question. 3 to 5 years, but like as Joe said, maybe a bit of a longer tail. The second question is from Erla. What are CLECs doing to get TDM to the LEC tandems, since the LECs don't have IP there? And are they doing TDM to up conversion for the long haul back to their switch locations, since TDM is not available much anymore?
Yeah, you've definitely hit on some of the key constraints. And what we have found works the best for the operator community is to look for a network that provides IP interconnect that also still has a shared type network into those legacy TDM tandems. What we see across the news channel and with what we're also doing with our customers is by having great relationships with companies that have that type of access. That really becomes the underpinning. People, I believe, I think companies, tier one companies specifically, have been signaling and nodding towards, they're likely won't ever be in a SIP interconnect on the local market, because there's very strategic, placement of IP tandems that can handle traffic in and out of those markets, and the business case to replace every legacy TDM piece of equipment in those markets is very significant. So looking more northbound into a hierarchy of where shared access and local tandems can be leveraged, has been a key component to helping operators transition off of their legacy networks. So that is a very important component. And then where the companies have these TDM constraints is getting circuits ordered. We've seen those scenarios dramatically, just in the last few years, we've had to actually cancel projects that, we're trying to get DS3s into certain markets and just could not get the focus to get them turned up, by the underlying TDM transport providers. They, got a lot of competing priorities. And so, in that example, one of the best approaches that we have is having what we call our TLR trunking solution, where we provide it's like an IP tandem overlay to the legacy TDM network. And then to the extent that the operator controls their own TDM, is where we aggregate to make the most economic sense to then bring the traffic all IP, all via SIP back into the operator or TNS aggregation sites.
Joe, I wanted to go back to one of your previous answers before I move on to our next question. We got a sort of a follow-up question to the first question we asked, and that's with regard to your previous answer, where you mentioned regulatory relief. Do you think the FCC will step in and require all carriers to allow IP interconnection?
I think as we look across, our key associations, like INCOMPAS, and there's various key organizations that companies associate with. I think through those organizations, it's important to leverage the regulatory organizations within them to represent the communities, and to really create regulatory recommendations that are actionable. Because what we are seeing is at a national level, if you're a national operator, you have a lot of flexibility in where you exchange traffic with other national operators. In fact, quite outside the realm of the legacy PSTN type architecture. So I believe that the action that needs to be there is a means to articulate that those local tariffs need to now have the flexibility for more regional or national handoff points, because a lot of the community has IP infrastructure and they have IP switching. So that's how we look to partner with the community, the carrier community, is to work through those types of solutions. With regards to what's been happening with call authentication, stir shaken, we do have regular engagement with the FCC, and we exchange a lot of data around the ecosystem's evolution, and that is one key point to be made. As far as current state of that, I think it's still very early in some of these cases, but I think it's actually to put it a little bit more directly, probably one of the biggest misses of the stir shaken requirements is that so much of the traffic moved to the national regional networks that the local interconnects were materially overlooked and the requirements to move to stir shaken, and I think that still needs to be addressed.
Yeah. We're going to have a bit of a dialogue, I think, going back and forth here on some of your answers to some of these questions, because now I want to revisit your second answer again on what CLECs are doing to get TDM to the LEC tandems. We have a second question from that. Erla, thank you for the follow-up. So when you say shared local connection, are you talking about companies like Telecom, as they are a competitor and then therefore not an option for a lot of the CLECs out there?
Well, I think, in Telecom sense, there's a number of companies that are out there that have these types of approaches, whether it's a shared or it's a new dedicated type architecture. The biggest point in that picture is that there's already existing transport into those LEC tandems or in those LEC end offices that can handle the traffic. When you look at how much traffic that has shifted, call it 10-15% of the traffic of a total customer interconnect model is actually local traffic, that still flows there. A lot of the traffic flows to mobile, a lot of traffic flows between mobile operators and fixed networks, but there's not a lot of traffic that goes between two wireline endpoints in a lot of the communities. So that it is advantageous that's there. So companies like like Cinch, like InfoPip and Peerless and those types bandwidths, they do have solutions as far as how to get into those like tandems, and they're quite good at solving those problems. And so I think it's, we're getting to a point in this evolution. Yes, everybody's to a certain extent competitor, frenemies, or partners in getting these things solved. But the overall cost and some of the operational concerns, I think, help tip the balance in the direction of making those transitions make sense.
Yeah, great. Our next question comes from Jerry Christensen of Caller ID Reputation. By the way, Jerry did a great webinar in the INCOMPAS webinar series. It's on our YouTube page on number reputation optimization. Go find it if you haven't had a chance to look at it. But Jerry's question is, has TNS determined the economic advantage of the industry migrating to all IP in support of consistently facilitating A-level attestation for rich call data?
Yeah. So, hello, Jerry. Thanks for the question. Yes. So I think that in this particular transformation that we're seeing in the network, a lot of the cost is driven by a few key line items, and that's the hierarchy or hierarchical components of TDM, and about every other cost that we look at, platform life cycle, saw switch, signaling costs, STPs, any layers of the additional architecture, really are far below what the TDM cost is at. So, when we've looked at some of these operators, it doesn't take too far into the picture to see millions of dollars a year in savings, 40-60% type cost improvements by moving to all IP. I think that you address those, and then getting attestation A, or getting the appropriate call authentication architecture in place is one of the great outcomes of it. That certainly brings interconnect accountability is what Stir Shaken really starts to improve upon there. As far as being able to then, have that trust between the interconnect community. But I do still see that there's a lot of gaps around, how operators that have invested quite materially in the consumer and the types of devices and applications that the consumers are using, the voice security modules, that I don't think, Stir Shaken goes as far enough to solve those problems. Especially when it comes to how brands interact with those consumers. And so I do think that there's some important work to be done to continue to bridge that gap. RCD is a really cool technology standard that can bring some promise in the future. There's just a lot of still TDM in the middle, and there's also just a very quickly evolving risk profile for the bad actors that's continuing to evolve faster than operators are evolving to solve the call authentication challenges in the middle. Jerry, I don't think that there's a simple answer that's there, but getting the customers, getting these operators off of TDM certainly improves attestation A, and that there should be great momentum in addressing that cost structure to help get there.
Yeah, Joe, I appreciated what you said. I think earlier, in our Q&A, just about needing to sort of leverage your associations, I think, to sort of work on this issue. And that certainly is something that INCOMPAS is doing right now in association with some other partners that care very deeply about this, including some of our own partners and then other trade associations that we've been working with that have been going into the FCC talking about IP interconnection for quite some time. So this is going to be an area, I think, where INCOMPAS is going to be actively engaged, I think, certainly through the rest of this year and then into the future, I think, as we wait for the commission to give that nudge, I think, to get us to where we all need to go, particularly for the sake of being able to fully standardize Stir Shaken and rich call data and some of these other IP-driven solutions. So appreciate you mentioning that. This is our last call for questions, as I think we have currently used up all of the ones that we have. But Joe or Barry, I'll give you guys an opportunity to give some closing remarks before I wrap up.
Okay. So what I would say is, first of all, just thank everybody for the time today. But I'd also leave with, supporting your comments there, Chris, on INCOMPAS's role and the community of carriers that participate in INCOMPAS and in other organizations to take, a position, to map out, where there's these competitive constraints. We've seen some really good companies that TDM is killed them or is close to killing them, and it's unfortunate because there's a lot of great people at those companies that we've worked with over the last couple of decades, and so it's unfortunate that we haven't seen a faster migration to all IP because of the ability, to provide a more robust voice security solution set. But also to then help normalize how we can, label calls in an authenticated framework, I think is really key to maintaining the voice channel. But also, voice is not going away, right? Voice is as important as ever. But we're also seeing, deep fake and various, threat vectors in really attacking these new approaches. And so the more complex those become, the more critical it is to have the right, voice security architecture and framework in place that call authentication and IP interconnect can bring. So there's a lot of compelling reasons, not only cost. And then for any of the, tier one networks out there that have a lot of TDM and a lot of price ups for everybody, I do believe that they also have a constraint as far as how do they, get relieved of the accountability to provide that interconnect, because I think at the national and interconnect levels, they've made choices that say they're really open to doing things all IP. So now how do we all just work together, to make sure that whether it's a local, regional or national type interconnect, that we can, level that, those barriers from the TDM marketplace. So
Yeah.
thank you all for your time today.
No, thank you both. I appreciate it, Joe and Barry. And if there's anything that INCOMPAS can do to facilitate, you getting in touch with Joe or Barry, please let me know. TNS is a wonderful marketplace member, always participates in our show, which, by the way, will be October 20th to 22nd this year in Denver, Colorado. If you haven't had an opportunity to register for that event, I want to encourage you all to do so. And also, really appreciate the presentation that was provided by TNS today. If you are interested in receiving the slide deck, please get in touch with me at cshipley@encompass.org, and I can reach out to Joe and Barry to provide that on their behalf. And then finally, wanted to let you know that this recording will go into our library on YouTube. There are a number of other webinars that INCOMPAS has hosted over the last several months that are there as well. So you can find this recording at any time if you want to revisit our discussion today there at YouTube. We have a number of additional webinars, I think, in the pipeline, but we will hold on some announcements for now, but just keep looking out for our emails, which will include all of that information. And really appreciate everyone's attendance today, the questions, excellent. But last but not least, Joe and Barry from TNS, thank you both so much for your presentation today. And again, looking forward to the continued partnership with TNS and to helping you grow your business and help some of our members with their find some predictability when it comes to their TDM transition.